everyone, Ellie here, and welcome back to Trails in the Sky 2nd chapter. Another bonus episode. So, I'm back to sitting in the lovely, comfy chair, got my tea, ready to do some more reading, and wanted you to come along with me because we still got, let's see, how many chapters to do? 1, 2, 3, 4, about 5 still to do. So, let's get started. The death of a friend. Wheezing, I breathed in, the sound high and whistling as the air fought to make it through my constricted windpipe. Still clutching tightly to my ornament, I unwound the sheets from my throat. Utterly exhausted, I tilted my head on its side and watched with reddened eyes as a strong stream of saliva dribbled down over the edge of my mouth and pooled onto the floor. When fresh air finally made its way into my lungs, it initially choked me, as nearly as bad as the sheet had. A thump from somewhere behind me startled me from my fit. The Jaeger demoness, like a spring-loaded doll, leaped up from the floor of the room. The single shot of magic I had previously landed in her gut should have done the trick, but the fluid way she moved about made it appear as if she was unfazed by the blast. Within arm's reach of where I'd subconsciously curled myself came the splintering sound of unseasoned wood being honed down by a giant woodcutter's axe. In the following instant, Sister Carnelia came flying through a newly opened hole in the timber door, her entry punctuated by a cloud of splinters. Her arms as pliant as whips, she passed by the female Jaeger in a lightning-quick motion, and with a turning assault, clocked her opponent with a full tilt in the face. The woman spun with the force of the blow and fell into a tumultuous thud, her head cracking hard against the floor. Like a prima ballerina, Sister Carnelia raised her knee high until she tucked it securely up against her sternum. She stared down at the unstretched figure on the floor. Muscles flexed and without an ounce of mercy, Sister Carnelia let her judgment fall with the heel of her boot, stomping down and crushing the wretched woman's throat. As I witnessed the grotesque and unsightly scene, Sister Carnelia gave me a quick glance in my direction and beckoned me on. Then, with a nimble hop into the unknown before her, she cleared the broken window frame and lightened to the ground. Quickly scraping my belongings together, I made after her in the same manner she had left, out the window with its two-story drop to the cobblestone side road below. Waiting close by and helping to break my less than elegant fall, Sister Carnelia led me on as we took flight along the avenue, brightly lit by the morning sun. A deafening blare from the orbital engine's whistle indicated that the first train was about to depart. Sister Carnelia immediately pulled a ticket out from her coat pocket and held it out to me from the side. Reaching for the fluttering strip of paper between her fingers, I realized I was still carrying the bar of soap from before, so I checked it, not caring where it landed or who it might hit. Aboard the train, the smoggy haze from the incessant smoking of the nattering gentleman had permeated into every nook and cranny of the passenger car. There was also the smell of newly printed publications and the occasional sound of someone clearing their throat. It felt rather awkward to have boarded the train bound for the Imperial City with my bag still in hand. "Do you know what your problem is, Toby?" Sister Carnelia remarked. "You're just like that ornament of yours." Using her white handkerchief, she stanched the flow of blood from my leg, which had been lacerated by the spinning arrow blades of the magic. "Once you get yourself into trouble, you keep digging yourself deeper until someone comes along with a billy club and whacks some good sense into you." Placing a folded magazine on my lap, she tapped on it with the nail tip of her index finger, indicating that I should read what it was inside. It was a copy of the Imperial Chronicle, which had been published just this morning. A several-lined article, buried pages within more titillating news, told of the suspicious death of one factory owner somewhere within the capital. This was the first time I'd ever become aware of Mick's real age. Sister Carnelia continued her lecture as she mercilessly upbraided me for my reckless behavior. "You missed getting caught up in all this by a hair's breadth," she informed me coolly. As for a loss of words of the shock of Mick's death, I put the magazine away in my trench coat pocket. "Another 5 minutes in that shop and you would have been gone to meet your maker too." I shook my head with trembling lips, let my thoughts fumble out of my mouth. I just don't get it. Why did Mick have to die? Images of Mick's cold body behind the counter alternated in my mind with that of the lump of metal wrapped in scrap paper. Just what the hell have I been carrying all this time, and why did anyone have to die over it? I pondered at length. Sister Carnelia met my eyes and held them. Because it's an artifact, she said simply. An artifact? I scoffed as I blew off her answer. It's not like I haven't carried a bunch of them before. Artifacts, in short, were the remaining legacy of an ancient civilization and the generic term for any unidentifiable mechanism which resembled that of an ornament. I had spent my days as a courier smuggling any number of those items under the false pretense that the goods I was carrying were nothing more than rare antiques, and readily placed them in the hands of those aristocrats amongst whom they are especially in vogue. And for the most part, my current possession appeared as though it belonged in the same group as the others. Personally, I could not find no other value in the collecting of these artifacts besides the indulgence of oneself in a decadent hobby. Chiding me as if I was a clueless child, Sister Carnelia rebuked. You're wrong, Toby. This one's much different than the others. After a moment's pause, she added, It's alive. Unable to grasp what she meant, I looked at her with a questioning expression on my face. Sister Carnelia tried again. Oh, what I'm trying to tell you is that it still works, although I'm not really sure what kind of power it actually has. It was unearthed during an excavation within the Empire's territory about 30 years ago. Sister Carnelia's subsequent story about the particular lump of metal told the dark history surrounding a group of aristocrats who relentlessly sought after it. The artifact itself had transitioned from hand to hand by those in power, and one after another they were murdered while slumbering in their bedchambers. Then, at the end of the 100 Days' War, its whereabouts were said to have been lost. And strangely enough, it turned up in the capital after all this time, she said, finishing up the account. An announcement chimed in the passenger car, notifying those riding of the scheduled time of the arrival. Sister Carnelia uncrossed and recrossed her long legs. The one who was after that artifact hired that Jaeger Corp to bring it to them, whatever the cost. So as a result, I was dispatched by the church in order to protect both you and it from falling into their hands. I sat staring down at the bag resting next to my feet as we approached our destination, and the moving train quietly began to lose speed. In the bowels of the imperial city, moving purposely through the crowd, we made our way between the rows of seats. Each time the swinging bag in hand struck the side of my knee, I became keenly aware of its presence. It was an unnerving feeling, quite like I had unintentionally brushed up against someone in an offensive way. Furthermore, it was nearly inconceivable to my mind that the ancient relic the Jaeger Corp were pursuing with such a frenzy was sitting right here inside the stitched cloth of this cheap handbag. What a fool Mick had been. Had he known the burden this object would bring would be one far more weighty than the both of us could ever have hoped to bear? I squeezed my eyes shut against the thoughts flying around my mind and addressed Sister Carnelia, who followed close behind me. Will we be making a break for the cathedral once we get off? Yes, that was the plan, she answered, scanning the scene outside the window of the passenger car. I think that's the only option we've got if you want to make it through this day alive. The station where the train was set to arrive was unremittingly crowded with countless droves of passengers, and as usual, the sky was slightly overcast. Everyone outside on the platform stood shivering in silence, with their collars drawn up to their ears, huddling close to one another for warmth, like a flock of waterfowl on the tidelands in midwinter. Don't worry, I won't be tossing you down a flight of stairs this time, Toby, jested Sister Carnelia. Although, if there were 2 or more of you at my disposal, I might have decided otherwise, she added. Evidently, the numbers in our welcome party this time had seen a rather dramatic increase. "The odds don't appear to be in our favor," she said in a low voice, her warm breath tickling the lobe of my ear. We won't be able to leave through the ticket gate." As soon as we stepped off the train, we stealthily moved to the opposite end of the platform, and after sneaking out a large door for only authorized station personnel, we jumped down onto a path of railroad ties and steel rails below. The biting cold wind of the capital swept freely across the unobstructed railroad tracks, causing me to shudder as if it ruffled our coats with its chilly touch. Slipping between the couplers of a pair of freight cars, we moved cautiously along their edge, sticking close to the shadows. Over on the cargo platform, workers were busy unloading containers. For someone who had had his mind set on becoming a dealer of pilfered goods, gaining illicit entry into the station house would be one of my first of all basics. Showing my ticket, I spoke politely to one of the workers. Then, with a scenario picked out of my head, I sold it to him as I played the part of a manager here on business with a celebrity of notable repute. Midway through our conversation, I introduced Sister Carnelia, who did her best to show the man a glamorous smile and feminine pose. I had possibly gone a bit overboard when I said that she was an opera singer, because the way she carried herself made her look more akin to a low-wage sell song in a bar of drunkards. Yet, in spite of it all, the worker graciously let us through. "You're so good at it that it's almost scary, Toby," Sister Carnelia said as we raced through the station's warehouse sector. "You should seriously consider doing another job," she went on. "I bet you're going to tell me to join the Bracer Guild, right? Come on. Those guys would turn me down in a heartbeat," I said as I laughed off the thought. Then throwing the idea back in her court, I asked, "So how about yourself? Why don't you join the Bracer Guild?" Reaching the end of the warehouse sector, we came to a stop in front of the large chain-link fence. Sister Carnelia crouched down, and while sliding a drainage cover to the side, laughed at my previous question as if it were insane. "Are you kidding?" she asked. "They'd gun me down the second I set foot in one of their branches." The winding, narrow stone tunnels like the one we ran everywhere beneath the Capitol. We crawled along as the light shining down through the drainage grates on the side of the large road above us illuminated the way like a trail of flickering orbital lampposts. The feet of those walking along the avenue passed right by where we were, but not a single person noticed us scraping our way along below them. And for some strange reason or another, the world just beyond the thin flagstone paved road appeared so dazzling in my eyes. Yet, the Ouroboros, loss of the artifact in hand, and a senseless sudden death, all of which had never crossed into my mind before, lay in wait for me, dared I venture into the open world above. As we pressed on, I began to think that the small round tunnel which we were crawling through would run on forever, when suddenly it merged with a high-ceilinged sewer surrounded by walls of countless blocks of chiseled stone. "We'll go through here and make our way over to where the cathedral is located," Sister Carnelia insisted. Raising one brow, she pointed her finger upward. "It's a lot safer down here than it is up there." "That's fine and all, but what are we going to do if it gets attacked?" Sister Carnelia grabbed my hand and with that stepped into the muddy darkness beyond. "Don't worry, Toby," she reassured me. "Faith isn't the only thing supporting the church." Carnelia. The flicker of dying orbital lamps mounted equidistant lengths along the sewer walls sent thin streaks of light across the surface of the rippling flow of the filthy sewage. Passing in front of these one by one, Sister Carnelia sped down the stone sidewalk as the sound of her body cutting through the racing tunnel winds trailed out behind her. Panting and out of breath, I continued to move my feet towards the darkness which lay before me as I chased after Sister Carnelia's flickering shadow. Wayworn, yet without a moment of repose, we settled unrelentingly with our sights set on the Cathedral of the Septian Church. We moved swiftly across the moss-covered stone pavement, the clacking of her heels echoing in the dimly lit underground. Above ground, the walking distance on the city roads from the railway station to the cathedral was about 3 blocks. If we made our way up through the drainage ditch just beyond the sluice gate, we'd find ourselves in the public square outside the massive sanctuary. Up ahead, the light of another orbital lamp came into view. Turning her head in my direction and without a word, Sister Carnelia extended her right hand outward in a wide motion, indicating that we would be turning that way at the next corner. Then, as if preparing for something, she rolled both shoulders in a grinding motion and relieved the last of her tension with a pop of the neck. It seemed to me as though she knew all too well what was lurking within these treacherous conduit ahead. Under the unsteady and sporadic coruscation of light, the body of Sister Carnelia surged around the corner and disappeared from view. 1, 2, 3 went the walloping echoes, followed by the sound of something being rolled in the channel of filthy sludge. As I turned the corner, the first things which I leapt into my sight were the contorted figures of 2 men on the ground, whom I barely missed treading on. Sister Carnelia, who was by this time several steps ahead, continued to run at her usual pace as if nothing had happened during the preceding seconds. "It's Carnelia!" came an angry, but a noticeably wavering voice from behind. I glanced to my rear to locate its source, and there I found a man who had dragged himself from the fecal-filled liquid, now laying next to his dead comrades, yelling with his dying breath as blood leaked out of his open mouth. "Carnelia, she's down here!" managed to croak before falling silent and still. Sister Carnelia paid no attention nor made any effort to look back. I turned my face forward and followed her example. The walls of the conduit leading directly to the sluice gate squared out in an ominous mouth of darkness, seemingly waiting for its next unsuspecting meal. Sister Carnelia gradually slowed her pace to match mine, as I had by this time become completely exhausted and out of breath. "It looks like these guys are dead serious about getting their hands on that item this time," she said as she focused her eyes on the darkness before us. "So, were those men old friends of yours or something?" I inquired. Sister Carnelia turned to face me with her dark and scarlet eyes. "Is that what you heard from those bracers the other day?" she asked. I nodded my head and questioned her no further. With head slightly turned down, I forced myself onward, eyes fixed on the tips of my boots. Unexpectedly, Sister Carnelia opened her mouth and said, "Do you remember what that woman you had a run-in with back at the inn?" I nodded slightly. "The whole reason I gave up on my life as a mercenary is because I didn't want to meet a tragic end like that," she continued. "A life of no meaning, forgotten by all." I looked up at Sister Carnelia, and seeing a slight show of emotion on the side of her face, heard her repeat the same line of words a few times before finishing her thought. "If I'm going to cash in my life's chips, then I think it's best that I fight for something worth fighting for. At least, that way I'd be able to leave a legacy of my existence behind." Taking in her words, I ran steadily beside her as I felt a sense of nondescript apprehension slowly begin to creep over me. During these short intervals between breaths, it suddenly seemed as if I was hearing the faint sound of sloshing water from behind, which caused me to prick up my ears and turn my head in its direction. "So, you notice it too, huh, Toby?" Sister Carnelia slowed her step until finally coming to a complete stop. "They've blockaded us from behind, so there's no turning back now," she said, the directness of her situation heavy in her voice. We had arrived at an intersection where the conduit we were in and another crossed paths, and just beyond the wide, fetid flow of sewage water before us, I could see the dimly lit sluice gate. I placed my back against the damp bricks of the nearest wall, and for a moment tried to catch my breath. "They're probably waiting for us," Sister Carnelia assessed doggedly after glaring across the flowing sewage of the merged channels and then turning her head to the rear and narrowing her eyes again. And fortunately this time we won't be able to circumvent them. With a sound of composure revealing her utmost resolve, Sister Carnelia took in a few deep breaths. I laid my hand on my ornament, gripping it in the palm of my sweaty hand, and then wrapped the strap of my bag securely around my opposite wrist. As always, Sister Carnelia checked her boots before standing upright. Then, taking a few steps back and holding my breath, I raced forward and darted into the Stygian flow of waste. The last stand. Sister Carnelia made such haste as she aimed for the path on the opposite side of the sludge-filled tunnel that I could sworn she was actually running on the liquid surface, based on my observation the minuscule spatters of her feet produced. And of course she passed me by in the blink of an eye, the space growing wider and wider between us as I continued to trudge my way through the filthy muck. Flashes of magic erupted from the darkness by the sluice gate and ripped through the air in rapid succession, but none of them could overtake the speed at which Sister Carnelia moved. An unyielding offensive by the shadowed aggressors, the settled feculence in the depths of the channel was thrown up in the form of a powerful tsunami, and in the instant before clearing myself from its destructive path, I feared that the terrible wall of sediment filth would crush me under its weight and bring me to an unsightly end. With a mid-air spin to avoid the last of the upcoming magic, Sister Carnelia flew to the opposite side of the channel with incredible speed, hurtling the wall of piled-up sandbags behind which the attackers took cover. She whirled her arms in a ferocious onslaught. One by one, like a row of pins being struck by a weighted object, the line of standing Jaegers crumbled to the ground. Sister Carnelia's attacks were like a whirlwind of death, blurry with the speed at which they struck. They came in advancing at inconceivable angles, puncturing throats, slashing open arteries, and then they were gone. So it was that I finally reached the cobbled path beyond the stagnant channel. Not a soul was left standing besides Sister Carnelia and myself. The cathedral is at the end of the ladder just beyond this gate, she indicated as she flicked dripping blood from her fingers like a child who forgot a handkerchief to dry her wet hands. Her eyes shone with the afterglow of battle. The Jaegers can't be far behind, so we better hurry, she warned. As if to punctuate her warning, the damp sound of numerous feet kicking up water as they advanced toward our present location had now become clearly audible to my ears. Stepping over the handful of Jaeger corpses lying scattered about behind the wall of sandbags, we made our way for the dry bed channel which lay ahead of us. I placed my hands on the slightly damp stone floor on the empty channel and crawled through the half-open door of the sluice gate. A falling water droplet struck the nape of my neck as I passed through the cramped opening, causing me to stop dead in my tracks. In the moment that followed, I recognized the sound of an ornament overhead on the verge of discharging a burst of magic. "Toby!" came the obstinate voice of Sister Carnelia as my vision was instantly flooded with a wave of exceeding brightness. Then, in the midst of the world of blinding light, came the hand of a savior which grabbed me firmly by the shoulder. The powerful feeling of being dragged and the explosion produced by the magic rupturing stone was almost simultaneous. As the booming roar swept across the whole of my body, I was thrown backwards towards the ground. Despite my clouded vision, I managed to somersault before landing in a prone position. Choking on the filthy puddle I had fallen face down into, I lifted my head in time to see a cloud of blackened dust being heaved from the mouth of the half-raised sluice gate door, and if the worst of my nightmare had now become reality, I watched as one after another the blockading Jaegers emerged from the smoky cloud, each bearing a glinting blade. I floundered about on the slippery mud and watched as the ranks sprang into action and closed in, their rugged facial features now visible to my eyes. Instantly rolling to the side, I unsheathed my hidden blade as I attempted to deflect a wide-arching slash of another with my bag. The cloth of the bag, over which the sharp edge ran, split open without a sound, and the paper-wrapped ornament fell onto the cobbled floor. Frantically, I searched for the ornament at my side, but I was unable to get a grip on it because of my clumsy, panic-stricken state. One of the mercenary men, his eyes intent on my throat, drew back his long sword to end my life. But before he could make his move, a dark silhouette appeared from behind him. It was Sister Carnelia. Her hands, moving with such finesse, disarmed the man in an instant, and left only his sword behind before he was launched from the view into the hanging shadows, filling the dank conduit. As the sound of the falling sword struck the ground with a high-pitched clink, Sister Carnelia dropped to her knees. Her soft whisper words were full of regret. "I'm sorry, Toby." With her head bowed forward, I watched in disbelief as several streaks of blood began to run down the side of her face. "It looks like the goddess may be calling you home too," she said gently. Once again, Sister Carnelia rose to her feet, her coat hanging in tatters. Eyeing her outer garment's ragged state, I knew for certain that it had been caused by the previous blast of magic. In order to protect me from harm, Sister Carnelia had willingly used her body as a shield to absorb the brunt of the force. And now, a stain of effervescing crimson blood began to seep through the cloth covering her breast. I swiped up the artifact which tumbled to the ground from the hole in my severed bag and tore away the wet paper which covered its surface. Then, with a cold lump of metal in my hand, I placed it atop my ornament as I gripped them both tightly together. The sound of footfall from the Jaeger Corps had now subsided. They stood in a cluster with their swords drawn, effectively blocking any possible escape through the sluice gate. Sister Carnelia let out a shrill cry, and I, as if taking the sound to be a command to attack, unleashed the energy pent up within my ornament. The device roared, and the instant the magic was discharged, I felt an intense wave of searing heat graze over my cheeks as my entire body was immediately blown backwards by its powerful force. Stunned, I collapsed onto the floor. When I finally forced open my eyes, I could see Sister Carnelia standing above me with her back turned to face me. Her right arm had lost all strength to function and hung limply at her side. Dazedly, she slid to her knees and slumped onto the ground before me. I pulled Sister Carnelia close to myself and, hugging her tightly, blasted the pack of assailing mercenaries with an insidious wave of magic. But then it was all over. My last stand ending as soon as it begun. Countless razor-sharp sword tips stared down at us from all sides. Convinced that I had finally reached my life's terminus, I raised my right hand while placing a false hope in my ornament that it could somehow protect us. I activated it, the last of its energy being consumed as it was drained to empty. Whirling arrow blades spun around us as I closed my eyes and accepted my fate. And behind my darkened eyelids, the endless realm of whiteness began to spread out before me. A legacy never to be forgotten. I was swallowed by the light, only to be spewed moments later onto a patch of hardened ground. The air was filled with the scent of sun-baked earth. Yet, for the floor of some grandiose heavenly estate inherited by those in the afterlife, it felt quite like the flagstones I had grown accustomed to in my past life. Upon feeling around in my immediate surroundings, my searching hand found soft locks of disheveled hair. It seemed as though Sister Carnelia had come as well as I to meet our Creator firsthand. Gradually, as I lay there, I felt something warm swell within the pit of my stomach. Weary and spent, I just let the feeling spread over me. It was at about this time that the sound of murmurous voices started to fill the air around us. Warm breath tickled across my nose and brow, letting me know that I was being stared at directly in the face. As my eyes adjusted to the intensity of the light, I realized that I was looking at the face of a young girl who beamed back at me brightly with the widest of smiles. However, she seemed a bit young to hold the esteemed position of the goddess. The knell of a bell overhead rang out loud and clear. Strangely, it sounded exactly like the cathedral's distinctive bell. Taking in this series of events to be rather odd, I picked myself up and at last awakened from the dream which had temporarily invaded my senses. There it was, a familiar cityscape, the sounds, and even the scent of the breeze. I knew by the place at heart. It was the public square of the imperial city which unfolded before the great cathedral, the Sepian Church. I opened the fingers of my right hand and stared down the metallic lump in its palm, entrusted me by Mitt. Golden filaments of light swirled across the surface of the artifact. I instantly recalled Sister Carnelia's words, "It's alive," as she said, and as I watched the ancient light gradually fade away before closing my hand around its surface once more, I believed it. Supporting each other by wrapping our arms around one another's shoulders, Sister Carnelia and I hobbled and limped our way towards a magnificent cathedral as the awe-inspiring figure of the goddess, Adios, stood silently with unfurled wings, watching over us from the deep-hued stained-glass window above. And for the events which followed, they were all settled in an orderly fashion. The metallic lump which Sister Carnelia had so daringly risked her life for was turned over to His Eminence, the Cardinal, who proceeded over the cathedral. He disappeared with it through the thick open door of the sacred vault. The level of corruption which had spread like a plague amongst the members of the imperial court, influential aristocrats, and even commissioned officers of the imperial army astonished even those mediators acting on behalf of the Bracer Guild. I stayed close by Sister Carnelia as she was laid out on a pew within the chapel of the cathedral. The real sisters of the church delicately pulled off her coat and cut open her vest, now stuck to her body with dry blood. Upon doing so, they found an ornate shirt of chainmail just beneath the layer of her clothing, which for some reason had seemed to bewilder them all. The next day, a certain aristocrat, who had hired the Jaeger court to carry out his selfish bidding, agreed to relinquish the artifacts in his possession in return for keeping his estate. Hence, his collection of forbidden antiques were brought under the safekeeping of the Septian Church. Sworn to secrecy, I made immediate arrangements to take my leave for the Calvard Republic, my destination, a high-class resort, which turned out to be an excellent way to recover physically and mentally, as well as forget about the series of events which had occurred over the past few days. Naturally, the bracers assigned to provide my escort were none other than Clayton and Pavel, who, before we left, guided me without a word to where Sister Carnelia was resting. I talked with Sister Carnelia about who had woken for a short interval, but as I got up to leave, she reached out her dainty hand and said to me, "Before you go, I want to tell you my real name. It's Ein Selnate." I took her unblemished hand in mine and gripped it firmly as I expressed my appreciation for what she had done. And today, now 3 years later, I stood staring at her name once again, but this time printed on a page of the Imperial Chronicle, Ein Selnate. Before those printed characters ran the few lines of embellished article. Yesterday, a corpse was discovered in an urban area of the capital just before dawn. The body was found to be covered with multiple stab wounds. The departed in life had been involved in charitable work and brought salvation to many afflicted souls in various regions throughout the land. As I read the last line, I envisioned the deceased's picture of Sister Carnelia lying motionless upon a darkened street. Yet, despite the blood-stained face I envisioned in my mind, I saw her as she rested in peace, a gentle smile crossing her face and vindicated of any transgression in life. As I rolled up the copy of the magazine in hand, I brushed my hand lightly across shining bracer emblem pinned to my chest. Almost 2 years had passed since I converted to my new line of work, which Sister Carnelia had so graciously recommended to me. And finally, I had become even used to using my real name. "Toby," came the whisper of Sister Carnelia as it resurrected in my ears. Now only known as Toby, I pressed my forehead up against the cold, clouded window of the passenger car, the refulgent eyes of Sister Carnelia shining brightly like a carnelian stone, forever ingrained in my memory. In my mind's eye, I watched as her coat sleeves trailed out behind her and she dashed away into the darkness of my memories. Opening my eyes, I gazed out through the window glass, and there I saw the bleeding rouge-colored illumination of the imperial city, as it faded away beneath the heavy white fog. The end. Holy crow, that was a lot of reading, but I hope that you enjoyed this little story set. I know I did. Holy crow, I learned a lot. Anyway, I will try to do the Dull Night series and take a look at some other things around in game to see if it's something that I could potentially read out and record, etc. Thank you though so much for watching this video. I really do appreciate it. If you can, you can leave a like and subscribe. Oh, and also hit that bell icon too, because that always helps to be notified when a new video drops or when I'm going live with a stream. Thank you as well for to encourage me to do these particular videos too, because I love lore. I love learning lots of things. So if there's anything else you can suggest, let me know, please. Put some stuff in the comments. I love chatting with you. Again, thank you so much for watching today, and I will see you next time. Bye!